So let's say that you really love one of these bills or really do not like one of these bills. Well, how do you effectively advocate as citizens or as representatives of your organization? How do you educate lawmakers for what you think will work, what is best for your clients? In this training, you will learn the key elements and timelines in the legislative process, how to track legislation, and how to most effectively communicate with your legislators. This is one of my favorite trainings to give. I gave it when I was a state representative. I've given it to groups. I've given it to just, you know, constituents who lived in my district. It's so important to know the process because that means that because if you care enough to reach out, we want you to reach out effectively. So there's many different types of bills. Um, and here are just some of them. There's ceremonial, resolutions, county bills, repealer bills, substantive bills, appropriations. There's lots and lots of different types of bills. Why does it matter? Well, it matters because if you're asking someone to put in, let's say, a repealer bill, that's a different kind of ask than if you're asking somebody to put in a substantive bill or an appropriation. Substantive bills are the only kind of bills really that count against a representative's bill slot. Each session, your state reps get between 5 and 7, depending on who's speaker, slots for substantive bills to propose changes to legislation. They only get 7 chances to do that. In the Senate, they can have they don't have a limit on the number of bills that they can put forward, but in the House they do. So if you're asking somebody to put forward a substantive bill, you're asking them to have 1/5 to 1/7 of their agenda focused on your issue. That's something else. That's amazing. Think about that when they say yes. What a bit, how grateful we should be that folks are choosing to focus, that our elected officials are choosing to focus on our issue that's so important to us. Repealer bills don't require a bill slot. They're actually pretty low bar. All you're doing is striking through a statute. That fentanyl test strip bill in its first iteration was a repealer bill. It didn't take up a bill slot from the representative, even though it was making significant changes that could save people's lives. And then finally, appropriations, while they don't take up a bill slot, they take up a lot of political capital. Oftentimes, the chair of a committee of a budget silo will say, you're a good member. What's your top 1 or 2 appropriations for this cycle? What do you really want to get funded? Well, you can only have 1 top and 2 top 2. So it really, it's very competitive to get to that spot in a legislator's agenda. And also, sometimes the Speaker of the House or the Senate President will ask, like, okay, there's some extra money, like, what's your top priority? What do you really want funded? And if you have positioned yourself right with your elected officials, then that might be your appropriation, might take up that top spot, especially if your appropriation is worthy of being somebody's top spot. So all of those kind of bills, they all go to bill drafting first. Bill drafting is our legislators, most of them are not attorneys, and so but our laws are written by attorneys, and they are written in legalese and interpreted and all of that by attorneys. And so when I get a bill idea, or when somebody gets a bill idea, they take that idea, they submit it to bill drafting, and bill drafting of either House or Senate then takes that idea and puts it into statutory language and finds the right statutes and everything. And then it's a back and forth between the legislator's office and bill drafting to get it just right. Then the bill needs to be filed. That's when the public can formally see that there's something going on, that something's been going on behind the scenes. And all of that happens before the first day of session, or by the first day of session. Your bills have to be filed, and you have to have already prior to that put your bills into bill drafting. It's so upsetting when somebody comes up with a great idea and like during session, and they're like, can you, get this passed this year? And it's like, well, no, this is a great idea, but I can't because I needed to have seen this back in the summer. That's generally when our legislators start looking for their next ideas for the coming legislative session. Most bills go to 3 stops on their way to the floor. Sometimes you'll get a 4th stop or a 5th stop if it's a really complex piece of legislation that touches a lot of different statutes from a lot of different, arenas. So, but for the most part, 3 stops and then the floor. And so that means that honestly, I mean, with session only being 2 months and then committee meetings only happening, a couple of weeks a month leading up to session, what kills more bills than like political opposition is actually the clock. You just run out of time. There's only so much that you can do in the 60 days of session, and when it gets down to the wire, there's not another week, there's not another committee meeting, there's not another chance for your great idea to be heard. And so that's why it's so important to get those ideas in early, like I said, for the summer months, and to weigh in around that time, and then to, show support early instead of waiting until late. By the time we're hearing about bills, that means that session's already underway. That means that all of the committee meetings leading up to sessions have already passed. So, know what your legislative session and what your state legislators are up to. That'll make it easier for you to weigh in a timely fashion. But let's say you do have an amazing idea, really good idea, but it's smaller in scope and you missed the deadline. The amendatory process is a great way of getting smaller in scope pieces of important legislation passed within a single legislative session. And this is always, like I said, small in scope, maybe changing a few words that would have a really big impact, or adding a small thing that really fits well with a bill that's already moving. That's all doable as an amendment. So let's say, you care enough to either ask your legislator to, sponsor a piece of legislation, to sponsor an appropriation, to put forward a repealer bill, or even to put forward an amendment. Well, if you care that much, you care enough to track your legislation and to track legislation and to be informed enough to put some of that burden of knowing what's going on in the legislation on your own shoulders. But how do you do it? My favorite site is myfloridahouse.gov. It's so easy to use. It is far superior, I think, to the Florida Senate. You can track bills there, both in the Senate and the House. You can use either, you can track bills, you can track members, you can track committees, you can track terms. So let's say it's fast forward, we finish this legislative session, it's the summer. I know that people are going to start filing stuff in November. So I set up, I want to know every time something dealing with behavioral health or peer support specialists or the paraphernalia drug statute or the murder definition. Anytime something dealing with that is filed, I want to be informed. So I can either put in keywords, I can put in statutes, I can be alerted every time a piece of legislation is filed that hits on that term, the peer support specialist, or that statute, whatever statute the definition of murder falls in. You can also track by person. So I said, Senator Rouson always does a lot in behavioral health. Representative Caruso always does a lot. Well, you could just set up a track for their legislation. So every time they do something, you get a bing. And you can change, let's say you want a weekly update versus a daily or instant update. You can set all of those preferences up on this site. It's so helpful. So now you know that Senator Rusan is, still continuing the good fight for behavioral health, because you've seen all of his bills and the majority of them are in the behavioral health and addiction silo, or the same thing for Rep. Caruso. Well, you can also track committees. So let's say I want to know any bill that's I know that our bills, always behavioral health bills, go through Health and Human Services or healthcare appropriation committees. So you can set up every time a bill is heard in either of those committees or subcommittees that you actually get notified. So you're staying abreast of, okay, well, how many bills of all of the bills being heard in the healthcare silo are dealing with behavioral health care? Are they really prioritizing this session or no? Are they focused somewhere else? It's a great, great, great site, myfloridahealth.gov. Check it out. The second site that I absolutely adore is the floridachannel.org. It is thefloridachannel.org. You can watch every single committee and subcommittee meeting. You can see who is asking questions on a bill that you're passionate about. You can see who's a no vote. You can see what the shape of the questions and answers are taking, and what the debate feels like. You can see if any concerns are expressed, and then you can respond. You can respond to the bill sponsor. So the other day, I was watching a committee and the bill sponsor says, if anyone has examples of that this bill would create problems, please reach out to me. Well, that is a powerful solicitation of examples. I shared that with friends and they reached out and said, yes, actually, in this instance, what you're proposing would be harmful. Our legislators want to make good policy, but they need people to weigh in. And really, our democracy works best in dialogue. So be part of the process, weigh in, set your calendar if there's going to be a committee hearing on something. I generally, during the 60 days of session, I have it on my computer in the background. I'll keep in one of my earpieces and take out the other one, and I'll work and listen so that when I hear certain phrases or certain bills come up, I can pay better attention, because so much happens so quickly during session. And the floridachannel.org is the best way to catch it live. They also have a great search function where you can search by this. You can search, let's say that it's a bill being brought forth by Representative Flaken, but you're not sure the name of it. You can just type in Flaken and it'll likely pull up the committee that the bill is heard in. You can look for the committee and you can search by committee name. You can search by bill number. It's such a great, 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 great resource for tracking bills during the legislative session and understanding what's going on. All right, the final piece. So you're paying attention to your legislation and the bills that are being proposed for this session for the behavioral health and public safety silos, and you want to communicate with your legislator. There was a survey in 2015 that found that the best form of communication, and it surveyed all of the state senators and state representatives, that the best was a face-to-face meeting, either in the Capitol or in the district. The second best was personalized correspondence via letters or emails, and the third best was calls. Well, this is back in 2015, so I've expanded this. Still, the best is a face-to-face meeting. In the Capitol, you'll get about 15 minutes. Later on in session, you might only get 7 minutes. In the district, you'll get a good 30 minutes. Know why you're meeting, though. Don't just go and be like, hi. What's so frustrating, because legislators are problem solvers. They want to come together to help you do something. Do you want a project funded? Do you need a bill passed to make the work that you're doing easier or work better? Is this just an introduction? Like, why are you inviting me to speak somewhere? Like, what exactly do you want out of this meeting? So you need to know before you sit down what you want out of the meeting. An introductory meeting is perfectly fine. Hi, Representative Toledo. I'm Jennifer Webb with Live Tampa Bay. I just wanted to sit down to introduce you to this new organization, Live Tampa Bay, and its affiliate, Project Opioid. So that's what that looks like. Or Senator Rousseau, you've funded such great stuff. I have a really good idea to help reduce stigma in the Tampa Bay area. I'm hoping that you can, quarterback this appropriation and accept and take on this appropriation request. I have people are dying from fentanyl overdoses who don't even realize that they're doing fentanyl. Right now in Florida, fentanyl test strips are illegal. There's a very easy statutory change. Representative Learned, would you be interested in hearing more about this statutory change and how it would impact the Tampa Bay region? So that's what those introductions look like. Make it sweet, get to the point, and then go back from there. Same thing for education meetings. Rep so-and-so, I see that you voted against the peer support specialist bill. Actually, nobody voted against that bill. It's such a fantastic bill. But let's say there was some misguided representative. I am with XYZ Recovery Center from Polk County, and I wanted you to understand how we use peer support specialists to meet the needs of patients in my facility. And I've also gotten permission to share some stories from folks who are in recovery on how peer support specialists have really helped them stay on the road of recovery and reduce relapse and reduce their, their feelings of loneliness, isolation, all of the things that lead people back out to use. So these are examples of then how you can also use this framework to advocate or to educate your to your elected official things that are important to you. Always get down to the nitty gritty at the very beginning and then backfill. Personalized stories for those of you who are in recovery centers or healthcare systems are really helpful. For those who deal with big data, getting county-specific data or district-specific data for representatives and for senators are always helpful, because then they can say, in my community, in my district, and district, 70, if it's Michelle Rayner, let's say, or in Senate district, I don't know the Senate districts, but like in my Senate district over in Hillsborough County, there's this number of people with opioid use disorder. It's so very helpful. So definitely have those face-to-face meetings, but know why you're meeting. Personalized correspondence, also a really great way of communicating. Especially if you're giving information that isn't readily available to the legislator. So like I said, I can't tell you how many times I would get emails and letters. If they were personalized, I would read them. If they were personalized and contained like either good anecdotes that touched on a specific policy or had statistics that I couldn't readily get, I would keyword them and file them, so that later when I would have my floor debate, when I'd be preparing for my floor debate or for my questions, I would pull them out and use that material, use the words of my constituents to help advocate for policy that they wanted in their own words. When I could do that, it felt like the process was really working, because I was bringing the words of my own constituents of treatment and recovery centers in my community onto the floor of the Florida House of Representatives and presenting it to all of my colleagues. And that's what we are as representatives. We represent, and so it felt really good. And it's important because it's things that I wouldn't have had the time or the ability to get while I'm up in Tallahassee doing the people's work. Calls are the third most effective. We'll get to those in a second. Social media posts in response to a question posed by a legislator, they're going to be read. If a legislator is asking for you to weigh in or to respond to a poll, do it. Stock emails and letters, less effective than a social media post in response to a question by a legislator. Social media messages and what about posts? These are not effective ways of communicating. Now, many state legislators do not even check their social media messages. This would be like Facebook Messenger, those things, because once they do, it opens up all of their social media messages to the Sunshine Act law or other kind of disclosure laws. And so to prevent that from happening, they just don't use their social media messages for legislative purposes. So a lot of times they don't even check it. So if your legislator doesn't respond to you after you've sent them a Facebook messenger message, it's not personal. It's probably that they just don't even check it. What about posts on social media? We've all seen these. This is where, let's say your legislator's talking about, I don't know, it is Earth Day, and they're talking about the importance of, clean waterways and fresh drinking water, and making sure that we're passing policies that will, so that our sea level, that will create resilient shores among rising sea levels or something like that. And you, because you're really passionate about behavioral health and substance use disorder policy, are like, oh yeah, that's great, but what about people dying from addiction? Like, that is a social media post is kind of like a conversation, and you wouldn't do that in a regular conversation. Don't do it on a social media post. It hits the wrong note. It seems really tone deaf. It also, like, are there other posts about behavioral health that you can comment on and say and do like some positive reinforcement, like, great, I love it when you focus on this issue, or have a conversation with your elected official, like, I really wish you would post more about behavioral health. It's so important. I'll forward you some information so that you can share it with folks. A lot of times that would be a far more effective way of getting across like the importance of our issue than just a what about post. Yeah. And so when I was an elected official, I followed the strategy that's on that is on the slide, and my colleagues that I talked to did as well. So office calls and messages like got tallied, and that means like, I want you to vote no on HB 762. I just made that bill number up, but like I would just tally those. Same thing for messages. When people would answer, I would answer the phone and they'd be like, vote no on HB 782, and then hang up. And I was like, okay, like it didn't matter if I was answering or my staff was answering or they got a message. We would tally those. Notes and postcards, if they're personal, they get read and then tallied. If their emails are likely to get read and responded to and then tallied. Stock emails or stock postcards tend to just get tallied. Most people read like one to get the gist of it, and then they're like, oh yeah, this is from that group, and I'm just gonna like, mark them down. To have your voice really heard, like I said earlier, schedule a meeting. A lot of state reps give their personal cell phone numbers out. When I gave this training during our webinar last week, Rep Learned was on, and he was like, oh yeah, my cell phone number is blah, blah, blah. And he just like gave it to everybody on that webinar. Use it, but be thoughtful. I mean, that's kind of a social contract. Somebody gives you their personal cell phone and they trust you to know when to use it and when not to use it. But definitely, be thoughtful, but you can use it. So my hope, though, is that you're not just an effective educator of our legislators, that you actually build relationships, not tally marks. And so how do you do that? Well, relationships are two-way streets. So just like you and your organization might have events that you want people to attend, legislators have events that they want you to attend. Legislators also have e-newsletters that they're hoping to get out into the community. So sign up for for your legislators' newsletters. Show up to their recap sessions, their office hours, or their events that they sponsor in the community. It means so much. It's so hard as an elected official to take so much time to build up a following of folks coming in and showing up for things that we host, that when you show up, it really makes a difference, and it makes our jobs a little easier because we're taking the time to do it. We want to get out into the community what we've been doing up in Tallahassee. The other thing is, it's always our knee-jerk reaction is to tell somebody when we don't like something, especially someone in power. And that's important. Do that. Hey, I think your thinking on this issue is a little off. Let me give you some more data. Let me give you some stories from clients of why this would not be helpful. But also, absolutely say thank you. Hey, I've noticed that you have put forward this peer support specialist bill for 3 years running, Senator Rouson. Thank you. Rep Toledo, I really appreciate you sponsoring this appropriation for the broader Tampa Bay community. Representative Caruso, I know that it must be kind of bittersweet putting forward this legislation that touches on something that's so personal for you. I really appreciate it. I think that your bill is going to help people. For all of the representatives who voted for the peer support specialist bill, I noticed that you voted for this. Thank you so much. Thank you, Senator. Thank you, Representative. For the chair, thank you for scheduling this to be heard. It's so important. Those thank yous are so few and far between during session that they will make you and by proxy your issue highlighted in the minds of the chairs and the representatives and the other folks that are up there because it's something that's wanted that doesn't happen that often, those thank yous. The final thing is do your homework. It's really weird when you sit down with a group of people and they start talking to you about a bill that they are advocating or educating their legislators on behalf of, and they don't even realize that you're a sponsor of the bill or a co-sponsor of the bill. And because oftentimes our talking points almost seem a little adversarial sometimes, like, I want you to pass this bill and it's important. And it's like, whoa, I know it's important. I'm a co-sponsor of it. So do your homework, know when your legislator has actually taken initiative on issues that you're passionate about, mention it to them, acknowledge them. If you miss something, like they're presenting a bill that you're passionate about, say, hey, I really missed that. I'm sorry. I think I'm going to go home later and watch it. Or how did that committee meeting go? I know that you generally speak on behalf of behavioral health policy. Did you have a chance to debate or did you ask any questions? What do you think? Those are amazingly effective ways because it shows that you're interested in developing a relationship. And where I want us to really get and how we'll know that we are effective in our education and in our relationship with our elected officials is when they call us, is when they call you, because you're the specialist. They're not. Even though I was passionate about behavioral health policy and got NAMI Legislator of the Year award, I didn't actually, the specialists weren't me. The specialists were you in the community. I would call Diane Clark and say, hey, I'm looking at this bill. Can you help give me can you help me understand how this would impact you? Or I'd call Martha Linderman and I'd say, hey, you've been working in behavioral health policy forever. What does this bill really do? Or what's the history of this policy? That is where I want us to get. When folks are calling us and asking, when folks are calling you and asking for your opinion on the policies before them so that they can be more effective at advancing solid policy solutions up in Tallahassee. So, and I think that the way to get there is by building these relationships and by, being engaged and knowledgeable about the process. Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure presenting this to you today.